Bichir van Baskerville is recognized as the Hound of the Baskerville family. The faithful hound lamented that he had been wrongly blamed for consorting with the demon clan. Consequently, he was condemned to face the guillotine as punishment. Before facing his sentence, he made a decision. He resolved that if given another chance at life, once he captured his prey, he would opt not to return as a hound. Upon awakening, he found himself bewildered by his unfamiliar surroundings. He discovered himself encircled by the wails of numerous crying infants. Feeling the weight of his body, he entertained the notion that he had descended into the depths of hell. On that particular day at the grand estate of the Baskerville family, the infants cried incessantly, their cries echoing throughout the estate. Hugo le Baskerville resolved to visit the babies, motivated by his desire to select one to be his heir and son. However, he was dismayed to find the infants beneath his expectations, deeming them unworthy. Suddenly, he felt a peculiar sensation wash over him. One particular infant caught his attention, seeming oddly different from the rest. He observed that this baby was quieter compared to the others. Quickly, he instructed the servants to bring the infant to the Cradle of Swords. Verker knew precisely who Hugo le Baskerville was, as he was the main culprit behind his framing and subsequent execution. He harbored a deep loathing for the man and yearned for vengeance. As he reached out, he realized that the man bore a striking resemblance to a younger Hugo le Baskerville. Verker had lived out his previous life as a hound. A hound is expected to be completely devoted to its mission. He remained loyal simply because he desired acknowledgement from the family, particularly from Hugo himself. 10 years after the gate to the demonic realm had opened, humanity emerged victorious in their battle against the demons. However, the reward for his victory was unjustly being sentenced to death. Remembering that ordeal, he vowed never to live that life again. Yet he realized he was powerless to change his circumstances for the time being, trapped within an infant's body. However, he believed that being moved to the Cradle of Swords presented a promising opportunity to prove himself. The Cradle of Swords was a renowned labyrinth where infants from the Baskerville family were traditionally brought. They needed to undergo a trial where they were thrown into a maze filled with swords. Following that, they had to navigate through the Styx River to be evaluated for their talents. To reach the Styx River first, he needed to head straight out of the helix-shaped wall of blades. At that moment, he strived with all his might to survive the maze. Finally, he found himself on the brink of reaching the Styx River. Upon reaching it, he beheld Hugo Lees and his servants awaiting his arrival. Quickly, he made his way directly to the river's edge. He submerged himself in the water, determined to harness the blessings of the Styx River. As he continued to descend deeper into the water, he found himself falling further down. The water seeped deep into his body and bones through his cuts, causing him intense discomfort. However, he reminded himself that he needed to endure for as long as he possibly could. The servants grew increasingly concerned as he remained in the water for an extended period. In contrast, Hugo Lu wore a smile, seemingly unbothered by the situation. The butler Barrymore informed him that the infant had been in the water for 7 minutes already. Hearing this, Hugo Lu was impressed by the infant's endurance. Shortly after, he informed Verker that he could emerge from the water. Verker heard the voice, but he found the prospect of coming out to be quite challenging. He absorbed the water and resolved to take in as much as he possibly could. However, suddenly, he found himself gasping for breath. Despite his struggle for breath, he remained resolute in his determination to endure. He lost consciousness and sank deeper. Shortly after, Hugo Lu pulled him out of the water. He was impressed that Verker had managed to stay submerged for such a long time and even ingested the water. He was amazed by the infant, prompting him to inquire about the child's name, which the butler provided. Upon hearing the name, he was pleased. He entertained the thought that the infant could potentially be capable of being his son, especially considering his greedy nature. Verker felt a sense of impending death looming over him. However, he realized that he needed to silently sharpen his teeth. As when the time came for revenge, he vowed that the Baskerville family would vanish from history at his hands alone. Verker van Baskerville is reputed to be the illegitimate offspring of Hugo. By the age of 8, his talent was so remarkable that he was hailed as a genius. Yet within his family, he was regarded as just another ordinary member. At the age of 20, he began undertaking assassination missions, and by 29, he realized that he had reached his limit in swordsmanship compared to the direct lineage of his family. At the age of 39, they emerged victorious, and by 40, he was rewarded for his unwavering loyalty. However, The reward he received was unexpected, as he was sentenced to death. After some time, Verker finally regained consciousness. He pondered whether the place he found himself in was a nursery. So he concluded that he must have successfully absorbed the Styx River. Shortly after, someone arrived, catching his attention. He overheard the woman mentioning that the madam intended to place something in his bed. The woman left a box on his bed, but he couldn't fathom why anyone would give him a present, considering he was just an illegitimate son. Suddenly, the box opened, releasing a cloud of black smoke. To his surprise, a black snake emerged from within. He was taken aback to realize that the snakes were blood mambas. He thought that the woman who sent the box intended to eliminate him. Shortly after, the snakes began charging towards him. He quickly grabbed them by the neck, realizing it could be risky, especially since he was just a baby. He hadn't anticipated that they would attempt to assassinate him so swiftly. The next morning, people came to visit Verker. They were surprised to witness unexpected scenes. They were shocked to see Verker sleeping peacefully next to the lifeless vipers. All the nannies who had been on duty that night were executed after being tortured due to the incident with the vipers. However, they were unaware of the reason for the vipers' appearance, and only Verker knew the truth. 8 years later, Verker had grown and was attending school. They were being taught the ways of the Baskerville family. On that day, their teacher announced that they would learn about the levels of swordsmanship. He explained that if they couldn't infuse the sword with mana, they would be considered beginners, but if they could even manage a little, they would be called sword experts. However, if they could infuse it strongly, they would be called sword graduates. Finally, reaching a level where the aura is solid and the form can freely change, they would be bestowed with the title of sword masters. The students were amazed to learn that the strongest of the Baskervilles, Hugo, had attained that level of mastery. On the other hand, Verker was contemplating the need to regain his power before regressing prior to the coming-of-age ceremony. The professor noticed that Verker was lost in thought once again. But he knew that Verker was special, with the ability to learn easily and possessing much more talent than the others. On the other hand, Verker was contemplating how many more years it would take for him to kill Hugo. The triplets from the family had been eyeing Verker from the start. They teamed up and bullied Verker. They confronted him about the strange rumors circulating about him. They said they had heard rumors that he had submerged in the Styx River for 7 minutes and strangled 2 vipers to death when he was just a baby. The triplets were the ones who had stabbed Verker in his past life when he was fleeing after the defamation. They were known as Hugo Lee's Baskerville's Trident. The triplets were expressing to Verker that they didn't like him. Suddenly, one of them took out a dagger and pointed it at Verker. He said that Verker was like steel, having emerged from the Styx River, which he believed meant that Verker couldn't be injured by blades. So they decided to test if Verker couldn't be injured. Quickly, they covered Verker's mouth to prevent him from calling for help. Verker knew what they were going to do, but he decided to play along for a little bit. Before they could start, they began to doubt whether the rumors could be true. But after 3 minutes had passed, they started to worry. 10 minutes later, they were surprised by the results. They were shocked to see that the rumors were true and that Verker couldn't be injured. Feeling anxious, they decided to let him go. Suddenly, the one covering his mouth was shocked to see that his finger had been cut off. They were shocked as Verker bit and cut off the finger of their brother. They looked at Verker and thought that he was mad and evil as he spat out the finger. But the 2 boys still displayed confidence, even though their brother admitted he was scared. Their brother was crying and complaining about his finger being cut off, so they grew anxious. During their conversation, Verker mentioned that he hadn't explicitly stated he would allow them to leave. They became enraged and desired to confront him aggressively. Quickly, he plunged the dagger into Verker's stomach. However, he was taken aback by the outcome. He noticed that Verker was uninjured, and his flesh seemed as resilient as steel. Verker gripped his wrist and twisted it, asserting that in Baskerville, power and talent surpass age. Verker malevolently advised them to continue playing until the end. He yelled out while Verker continued to twist his arms. Verker desired for the triplets to experience the repercussions of their actions towards him. One of the triplets then recognized that the rumors were indeed accurate. Swiftly, Verker delivered a punch to his face. 2 of his brothers were astonished as their older sibling collapsed unconscious to the ground from Verker's punch. They sought revenge and were still eager to engage in a fight. But Verker promptly demonstrated to them that they couldn't seek revenge. In a flash, all of them were injured and frightened by Verker, but he reassured them not to be afraid, as their injuries could be treated. He seized the dagger and informed them that he wouldn't allow them to leave the room. However, he informed them that he would permit one of them to leave. As they looked at Verker, he asked them which of them could leave. Verker tossed the dagger to them and instructed them to decide among themselves which one could leave. He stressed the importance of deciding quickly, as he couldn't wait much longer. He suggested that at least one of them should be allowed to live. Upon hearing this, the brothers were perplexed and uncertain about how to proceed. They exchanged looks, realizing that each of them needed to survive, yet also understanding that they had to eliminate one another. Meanwhile, on the other side, the patriarch and the butler were engaged in conversation. He was informing that the Morgue clan was claiming that the ruby mine belonged to their territory. He dismissed its significance and inquired if there was anything else to report. So, the butler informed him that Verker had achieved the highest score on the written exam, which pleased him to hear. The butler then informed him that the practical exam would take place in 5 days, and they were in the midst of preparation for it. Afterward, Barrymore told Hugo that there was one matter he needed to inform him about regarding the juvenile fortress. He informed Hugo that there was a significant altercation between the young masters, which piqued Hugo's curiosity. He told him that they hadn't died, but each of them had sustained severe injuries. Hugo then believed that they wouldn't fight amongst themselves since they were so close. So, Barrymore told him that Verker was the one who had wounded them, which caught him by surprise. Shortly after, Verker was summoned to the room. He stood there with confidence, sporting a smile. Hugo told Verker that he had grown significantly since the last time he had seen him. Hugo then confronted him about what had happened with the 3 brothers, and Verker admitted to it. He remarked that Verker had inflicted a deep wound on the brothers' bond of trust. He mentioned that since that day, the 3 brothers had been acting independently and didn't even speak to each other. Upon hearing this, Verker simply smiled. Hugo asked Verker if he thought he was wrong for turning his brother's relationship into a total mess. But Verker firmly stated that he was stronger, and a stronger person couldn't be wrong. Hugo then asked why Verker didn't feel an ounce of guilt, even when his brothers stated that they would graciously forgive him. Verker then asked happily if his brothers forgave him. The memory from Verker's regression is that the youngest daughter of a family, who was ruined by the Baskerville Clan, came to visit and told Hugo that she forgave them. She also offered a mass since she became a nun. But Hugo's response after the mass was surprising. Verker repeated what Hugo had said, that he believed forgiveness is just an excuse made by the weak who cannot seek revenge due to their lack of strength. Hearing this, Hugo was pleased. So Hugo complimented Verker, saying he understood the family motto very well. Shortly after, Hugo called Barrymore. He informed him to allow Verker to take any snack from the food storage. Hearing this, Verker was happy. Shortly after, Verker left and Barrymore helped him. However, before he could exit the room, Hugo gave him instructions. He instructed him to perform satisfactorily on the interim assessment. He stressed to Verker the importance of not being defeated by the direct descendants of the Baskerville family. Upon hearing this, Verker became irritated with his expectations. Shortly after, Verker and Barrymore arrived at the food storage and presented him with the renowned chocolate favored by the gourmets of the Morgue clan. Verker informed Barrymore that he didn't want anything that had been processed. He conveyed to him that he specifically required the cacao beans with a rich aroma. Barrymore was perplexed by his inquiry about the beans. Shortly after, he brought the beans that he had requested. They explained that those were blood beans, renowned for their rich aroma, and with just one bean, they could produce 100 liters of chocolate. Barrymore thought that Verker must really love chocolate to consume such bitter beans on their own. Observing Verker, he believed he had discovered a way for him to have as much chocolate as he desired. The chef asked if Verker wanted them to be processed, but Verker declined, stating that he would take them as they were. Barrymore was confused and pondered that Verker had peculiar taste. Verker did not intend to eat the beans. Instead, the blood beans would be utilized during the practical exam within 5 days. During the practical exam, Verker was confident. He declared that on that day, a massive catastrophe would occur, something that had never happened to the Baskerville clan before. In that universe, the Baskerville family is commonly known as the Berserker family. The children of the family undergo rigorous early education, and once they are able to take their first step, they must ascend a steep mountain as part of their initiation. At bedtime, as part of their adaptation to harsh environments, they are required to sleep next to the corpse of a monster. Once they reach the age of 8, the young members of the Berserker family begin their perilous evaluation process. Eventually, the day of the practical evaluation arrives, marking the commencement of a survival examination. At the Loup Rouge et Le Noir mountain, situated on the outskirts of their territory and teeming with monsters, the young hounds assembled for their evaluation. The man elucidated the fundamental components of the practical evaluation to them, outlining what they could expect. Pavlov, known as the Shadow Dog, proceeded to outline the basic contents of the practical evaluation to them. He conveyed that their task was to survive in that hostile environment for a month, during which they would be required to hunt down formidable and robust monsters. He elaborated that the total points they could earn would amount to 90 if they successfully fulfilled all the conditions set forth. Additionally, he mentioned that if they managed to steal the badge from others, they would be awarded additional points. The students listened attentively as he emphasized that in the event of death, they would receive 0 points. He advised them against straying from the designated area. The other students engaged in gossip about Verker, spreading rumors about his purported feat of remaining submerged in the Styx River for 7 minutes. They acknowledged that Verker posed tough competition due to his remarkable feats. Verker felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of returning to the mountain, as it had been quite some time since his last visit. The triplets felt apprehensive about making eye contact with Verker. Shortly after, Pavlov announced that the exam would commence at the sound of the bell. Upon ringing the bell, he extended his wishes of good luck to all the participants. Quickly, they all sprinted towards the mountain with determination. The student participating in the evaluation recalled the location he had seen during last year's exam and considered heading there. They trailed behind Verker, contemplating the idea of taking everything from him during the evaluation. The triplets also moved swiftly, their pace matched with heated arguments as they ran. Pavlov then stood still as the exam began, observing the students as they embarked on their evaluations. He anticipated that something significant was about to unfold as the evaluation progressed. The exam didn't outright encourage killing, but it wasn't prohibited either. However, if they did resort to killing, points would be deducted, so students made every effort to avoid taking someone's life too easily. He felt a sense of reassurance, knowing that his shadow dogs would be present to ensure that casualties remained minimal. A man lurked behind a tree, covertly stalking Verker. He pondered Verker's destination, noticing that he was heading towards the restricted area. He observed that Verker displayed no signs of fear, despite approaching the restricted area. Finally, Verker reached the location he had set his sights on. He tested the ground first, concluding that its soft texture would be suitable for his purposes. He made the decision to reside there for the remainder of the month. Little did he know, someone was following him from behind, completely unnoticed. The man was taken aback when Verker decided to take a rest. He began gathering supplies from his surroundings, preparing for his stay in the area. While others engaged in conflict with each other, Verker focused on securing provisions for himself. He remained complacent and did not take any action. Meanwhile, others battled against monsters in the vicinity. On the contrary, he rested at the makeshift shelter he had constructed. The man following him couldn't believe Verker's passive approach to the exam. He observed that Verker remained inactive, opting to rest and hunt for food without engaging in any actions. So began to doubt the validity of the rumors surrounding Verker, concluding that there was no need to continue observing him. As the man departed, Verker felt relieved knowing that the observer was no longer present. Camping outside reminded Verker of his past, evoking memories of days gone by. In the past, his companion had informed him that the bloody beans contained a high concentration of cacao, which could be used to make the fish less smelly. That's why Verker sought to acquire the bloody beans, aiming to use them to mask the scent of his hunt. With the observer gone, Verker's mind began to wander, contemplating his next moves. He pondered whether he should commence his hunt now that he was alone and undisturbed. A few days later, Verker decided to venture into the restricted area. Despite the prohibition, he disregarded the rule and entered the restricted area. He pondered the reasons behind the prohibition, recalling how in his previous life, he had roamed the area casually without any restrictions. As he delved deeper into the area, he noticed charred tree roots, indicating signs of past destruction. Suddenly, something caught his attention. To his surprise, he finally found the burning stool he had been searching for. He recognized that it came from a specific monster known for its distinctive droppings. He stood in front of the monster without a hint of fear, facing it head-on. The monster he had been seeking was a hellhound. The hellhound was a canine creature from the depths of hell itself. The hellhound held a rank of B+, and its flames were so intense that normal people wouldn't stand a chance of surviving them. The hellhound serves as the sentinel creature that devours the blazing infernos of the petroleum realm. In his previous existence, at the tender age of 18, Verker managed to just scrape by and overcome it. Now, as a mere 8-year-old, Verker has stumbled upon a method where even a child could stand a chance against a hellhound. He boldly charged forward, strategizing to exploit the first weakness that could aid in defeating the hellhound. With agility and precision, he skillfully dodged the hellhound's advances and slipped through behind it. The initial weakness of the monster lies in its limited ability to move only in straight lines, making it challenging for it to abruptly change directions. Caught off guard by Verker's nimble maneuvers, the hellhound found itself surprised and momentarily disoriented. Verker then produced a bottle of water from his possession. He was aware of the ancient lore that hellhounds were incapable of crossing water, even if it was merely a shallow depth. Shortly after, the hellhound made another attempt to ensnare Verker in its grasp. He anticipated that the hellhound would lunge towards him with its jaws wide open. Quickly, he hurled something towards its gaping maw. Verker swiftly dodged the charging hellhound, narrowly escaping its reach. The hellhound's fury intensified as its attempts to capture Verker were thwarted once again. Suddenly, the hellhound sensed something peculiar. Shortly after, the hellhound collapsed to the ground as Verker tossed a chocolate into its mouth, aware of its toxicity to canines. The poison was potent, as just one bean could contaminate 100 liters of chocolate. Verker then drew his sword, recognizing that this was the opportune moment to strike and vanquish the hound for good. He was aware that the hellhound couldn't be slain by a blow to its ribcage. So, he aimed for the kidney, understanding that it could inflict significant damage to the hellhound. He swiftly withdrew the sword from the creature's flesh. The sword successfully penetrated the monster's flesh, delivering a decisive blow. Shortly after, the wound began to emit something unusual. When he captured a monster, an energy known as XP or karma accumulated in the body, strengthening it with each victory. He channeled the mana into his sword, sensing that it became noticeably lighter in his grasp. He couldn't help but wonder what Hugo's reaction would be if he brought back a monster with such a strong rating. With the successful defeat of the hellhound, he had already secured the top spot in the practical exam. As a reward, he desired a specific object that he would have never dared to ask for in his previous life. Suddenly, another hellhound emerged, appearing before him. More of them began to appear, their numbers growing by the moment. But he remained calm, confident in his ability to overcome them once again. Shortly after, he swiftly eliminated one of them by slicing off its head. He prepared to charge, knowing that he still had beans left to use in the fight against the remaining hellhounds. Suddenly, the hellhounds began to act strangely as they noticed the presence of another entity. Verker was surprised and curious as to why the hellhounds were reacting in such a manner. He observed that they looked scared, prompting him to wonder what could possibly frighten creatures as formidable as hellhounds. So, he turned around, sensing that there was something unusual behind him. To his surprise, another formidable monster appeared before him. It was a cerberus, its appearance striking with its 3 heads, and its rank was an impressive A+. Verker pondered why the creature lurked below, considering it seemed to have alternate habitats. He observed that the monster was wounded and bleeding. He speculated that someone might be attempting to hunt the creature, given its injuries and the arrows lodged in its flesh. So, he considered the possibility that it was being pursued by the barbarian's tribe, which prompted it to flee downward to evade capture. Verker realized that it presented an opportunity for him to kill the monster, since it was already wounded. In his previous life, Verker concealed his powers from the Baskerville family, which included his exceptional expertise as a sword expert. Quickly, Verker wasted no time and charged at the monster. As he attacked, his sword failed to pierce through the creature's tough hide. As a result, the other head of the monster attempted to attack him. However, he managed to slice his sword through it, despite the creature's retaliatory efforts. Verker thought to himself that he could do it, finding a surge of determination within him. The monster charged with all its might. The monster, confident in its strength, believed that Verker stood no chance of defeating it. Verker was taken aback when his sword crashed against the monster's tough skin. He realized that he had let his guard down, leaving himself vulnerable to the monster's attack. The monster's claws exerted a powerful force, pushing him back with great strength. Verker collided with the tree with considerable force, the impact jolting through his body. At that moment, Verker was vulnerable, having sustained severe damage from the impact. The Cerberus was unlike the hellhounds. It was much stronger and had the ability to kill those who attempted to escape. As a consequence, Verker became unconscious. After a short while, he eventually opened his eyes, filled with surprise. He noticed the Cerberus standing before him. Verker felt a sharp pain in his left arm and worried that it might have been torn off. To his surprise, he observed that his arms were severely injured and contorted. However, he pondered why the Cerberus had ceased its attack, leading him to consider if it was due to the effect of the river Styx. Shortly after, the Cerberus attacked, prompting Verker to swiftly dodge out of its path. He feared that he wouldn't withstand another blow. He realized that he needed to strategize his approach to fighting it and carefully consider the best course of action to find a solution. Suddenly, the monster noticed Verker attempting to flee. Verker understood that his best chance of survival was to flee. As he ran, the monster began to pursue him relentlessly. He noticed that he was nearing the fence and realized that if he could get past it, he would be out of the restricted area. He pondered that if he could reach the traps he had set, he knew he would likely have the upper hand and emerge victorious. However, he thought that if the Cerberus caught him before he reached the traps, he would likely meet his demise. Quickly, he sprinted towards the location where he had set the traps. He hastily searched for the spot where he had set up the traps. Shortly after, he spotted the location where he had placed the traps. Verker ran with all his might, knowing that in just a bit more, he would reach the traps. However, the Cerberus was also closing in on him rapidly. Then he realized it was the perfect moment to trigger the traps. The monster closing in, Verker leaped off to avoid the traps below. He was surprised when the monster's mouth came dangerously close to his face. However, the ground suddenly began to soften under the weight of the monster's steps. To its surprise, it suddenly fell through the softened ground. Verker successfully reached the other end where the ground was safe. He landed on the ground and breathed heavily, exhausted from the intense ordeal. To the monster's surprise, he had set out a trap filled with a cradle of swords. Verker was ecstatic, as he hadn't thought he would be able to capture a Cerberus. Due to the bloody bean essence he spread on the wooden spears he made as traps, it poisoned the Cerberus just like the hellhounds. But he noticed that it wasn't succumbing easily to the poison. He realized that the Cerberus was a high-ranking demon, which explained why the poison wasn't taking effect easily. So, he decided to attempt to kill it with a wooden spear. Shortly, he aimed the spear towards the Cerberus. The spear pierced through the monster's flesh. It let out a piercing scream of agony. Verker counted down the moments until the monster would lose consciousness. As he counted down, the monster gradually began to weaken. However, he noticed that it was still putting up a fight. But as he noticed it was much weaker and couldn't move, he cautiously approached it. Shortly after, the monster completely perished, succumbing to the poison. Verker handled the situation with ease and let out a sigh of relief afterward. He realized that the rumors were true about the wooden sword only taking 7 seconds to take effect. He pondered that the wooden spear he had used must be different from others, considering that he had laced it with the venomous fang of the bloody mamba, known for not allowing a man to walk more than 7 steps once bitten. Shortly, he felt the energy of the Cerberus's mana seeping into him as its 3 heads lay lifeless. Afterward, he pondered how he could transport the large beast for his hunting expedition. Subsequently, he had a sudden realization that Cerberus acted as gatekeepers, indicating the presence of a dungeon nearby protecting something valuable. The dungeon is a mysterious place that holds treasure, and sometimes powerful monsters make it their lair. He scattered the Cerberus feces, hoping to avoid confrontations with any smaller monsters lurking around. He reasoned that he could trace back the Cerberus tracks to pinpoint the location of the dungeon. So, he ventured hastily to find it, eager to uncover the secrets hidden within. In no time, he found the dungeon being guarded by the Cerberus. He briskly walked to the entrance, feeling a sense of nostalgia as he stepped into the dungeon, a place he had entered in a past life. As he stood at the entrance, he could sense the mana pulsating beneath the decaying surface. He then noticed the absence of light and realized that the dungeon was deeper than he had anticipated. However, despite the darkness and depth, he still felt a surge of excitement coursing through him. He felt a surge of excitement, pondering what kind of treasures awaited him inside. Without hesitation, he advanced toward the dungeon entrance. He observed ruby veins scattered throughout the area, leading him to speculate that it must be linked to the Red All Mountain. Shortly after, he caught sight of a glowing light. The brightness was so intense that he couldn't properly discern what lay ahead of him. Upon entering, he beheld a sizable red crystal. He pondered that mana seemed imbued within the ruby, causing it to emit light and illuminate the dungeon's interior. He then noticed something that captured his attention. He spotted a skeleton and inferred that someone had been there before him. Suddenly, as he observed the skeleton, he noticed a letter nearby and picked it up. He speculated that the skeleton must have been there for quite some time. Upon reading the letter, he recognized that it bore the same handwriting as the Baskerville family. The message conveyed that he had penned the letter for future generations, urging them not to repeat the same mistakes he had made. In the letter, Cain recounted how he and his brother Abel stumbled upon the dungeon by chance, which presented them with countless trials as they ventured deeper into it. They eventually discovered the chamber containing the ruby and remained there for 3 years. So Verker speculated that the final assignment must be located somewhere within the chamber. He theorized that the final assignment must involve the ruby itself. Below the ruby, there was a phrase that the brothers had contemplated for a long time. In the end, they reached a conclusion. They realized that just as they had been together in their mother's womb, to claim the treasure, they must reunite as one once again. As they grasped the meaning of the phrase, they drew their swords. They understood that they needed to do that in order to depart from the chamber. They engaged in combat, realizing that only one of them could leave to claim the treasure. After the fierce battle, Cain ended up killing his own brother. But despite his actions, nothing changed in the dungeon, which shocked him. He pondered why nothing had changed even after he had slain his own brother. After moments of regret, Cain decided to leave the place. He wanted to convey in the letter to leave the place, as there was nothing to gain from the Devil's Den, which only served to taunt humans. Verker concluded that the brothers had arrived at the dungeon, but departed empty-handed. He speculated that Cain and Abel had misinterpreted the phrase, leaving him to wonder what it truly meant. He reflected, believing that there was no dungeon that couldn't be solved. When he gazed at the skeleton, he noticed something peculiar. He realized that he finally understood what the phrase meant. So he felt relieved, knowing that he had grasped the meaning right away. He realized that Cain and Abel had been hindered by a fixed idea. Verker approached the ruby, pondering that its mysteries lay within the dungeon's confines. He realized that as soon as the ruby's light cast a shadow on him, he became too. Verker finally realized the answer to the riddle and shattered the ruby instantly. He finally understood that the answer to the riddle was shadow. As the ruby was shattered, it began to emit a dark aura. The mana emanating from the ruby spread to the walls, causing them to slowly open. When the door completely opened, Verker finally caught sight of the treasure within. He realized that the item before him was the relic of the Devil's Den. The sword emitted a strong black and red aura. Verker read the message, which stated that only those with Baskerville's blood would be able to wield the sword. As he read the word Beelzebub, he grew curious, wondering where the sword originally came from. He realized that Beelzebub was the same name he had read about in books as a child, known as the gluttonous fly Beelzebub. In order to halt the 7 calamities, the heads of the 7 families stepped up to confront each constellation of the Devil's Holy. The Devil's Holy constellation that the first Baskerville patriarch fought was Beelzebub. The remnants of Beelzebub were stored in the lands of the Baskerville, and Beelzebub's demonic energy was said to have attracted and subdued monsters. However, he realized that the legend was true, and the sword was later taken by the demon clans. Verker desired the sword for himself. So, he quickly attempted to pull it out. However, he failed as something surged through his hands like electric lightning. It left a mark on his hands. Suddenly, he noticed that his flesh began to absorb the energy. To his surprise, a sword materialized through his hands. At that moment, he realized that he had successfully obtained Beelzebub. He was excited and wondered how much stronger he would become in his current life. Verker then opted to return since it appeared that there was more to acquire or uncover. Suddenly, he began to feel dizzy. He sensed his body had frozen, rendering him unable to move at all. Consequently, he knelt down, losing balance as he realized he was feeling hungry. He thought that perhaps Beelzebub was suggesting Verker should eat something. Shortly after, Verker finally exits the dungeon, clutching his stomach. He felt a voracious hunger gnawing at the insides of his stomach and noticed his sense of smell heightening, as he believed he could smell something delicious. Suddenly, his hands began to move without his control. It was as if he was being led in a certain direction, as though there was something important waiting for him at that location. But shortly after, he found himself back where he had killed the hellhound earlier, next to its lifeless corpse. Suddenly, Beelzebub pierced the hellhound's corpse. The Beelzebub was absorbing the blood, causing Verker to feel the insides of him reverting back to normal. He wondered how much he would need to feed the Beelzebub to satisfy it, considering its reputation as the gluttonous fly. Shortly after, the Beelzebub stopped sucking the blood from the hellhound. Now, the first slot of blood it sucked was from the hemorrhage hellhound. The Beelzebub returned to normal, and Verker pondered whether it was the Beelzebub's ability. He heard that the glutton of flies is said to possess the power to absorb the opponent's skills into its own. However, due to its hazardous nature, Verker could only steal up to 3 abilities at the moment, with the hemorrhage of the hellhounds being the first. Suddenly, something came to his mind now that he could steal abilities. The hellhound's body had a lot of blood dripping from it. It began sucking the hellhound's blood again, which Verker thought wasn't a good idea since he was supposed to bring the corpse for his hunt. Verker patiently waited for a couple of minutes. Then he struck the Beelzebub and told it to stop its actions. In no time, the Beelzebub had obtained the 3 slots, completing Verker's stolen abilities. He realized that the Beelzebub had also consumed the sewer rat that was crushed underneath the monster, so it gained high-speed regeneration. He picked up the rat and thought it was fortunate that the Beelzebub had also absorbed it. Now that his plan is finished, he thought to wait there until the practical exam is over. The young hounds, whose practical examinations were completed, returned to Baskerville. They all brought their hunt, and then they received their rewards such as a shield, sword, or necklace. The evaluators were surprised when a certain young hound brought a monster they didn't expect. Barrymore informed him that Verker accidentally crossed the restricted area and hunted the Cerberus. Hugo couldn't believe it, but Barrymore explained that the monster was already injured by a tribe and was finished off by Verker using his poisons. Barrymore informed Hugo that he was unaware of the poison Verker used, because Verker returned to the dormitory just as Barrymore was about to inquire about it. However, despite this lack of information, Hugo still felt amazed by Verker's actions. Barrymore further expressed his surprise at Verker's actions, particularly considering that Verker wasn't a legitimate son of the Baskerville family. Hugo explained that when he raises young hounds like Verker, he doesn't discriminate based on their bloodline. He aimed to make Barrymore understand the importance of not discriminating against individuals based on their lineage. In response, Barrymore offered an apology for his previous remarks. Shortly after, he informed Hugo that he would summon Verker. After some time, Verker arrived at Hugo's location. Hugo promptly inquired of Verker how he managed to capture the Cerberus. Verker explained that he baited the Cerberus by putting chocolate on his spear. While they conversed, Barrymore observed from the sidelines, noting that their interaction resembled that of a father and son. Hugo then questioned Verker about why he didn't respond properly when the butler asked him about the hunt. Verker simply replied that he didn't respond properly because the butler wasn't his master. He informed Hugo that the master of the clan he belongs to is also his master, a statement that pleased Hugo, as it indicated Verker had learned well. Hugo then informed Verker that he would reward him, prompting Verker to believe that he could finally obtain what he desired. To their surprise, Verker expressed his desire to gain access to the 10,000 epistle library. The library is one of the largest in the empire and is situated deep within the heart of the Baskerville clan. Hugo asked Verker why he wanted to go there, reminding him that only special individuals are granted access to the library. So, Verker assured Hugo that if access was not permitted, he would give up on the idea altogether. However, Verker was taken aback when Hugo told him that he could indeed enter the library. Hugo also instructed Verker to make sure to read the Baskerville 6th technique. Verker was surprised, as he didn't expect Hugo to allow an illegitimate son like him to read the Baskerville 6th technique. Hugo's current cultivation level is the Baskerville 7th technique. Before Verker's regression, Hugo was able to unleash 9 of his fangs. Verker then vowed to surpass Hugo, fueled by his determination to overcome the discrimination he faced in his past life. He desires to obtain the greatest essence of Baskerville, which is said to be able to subjugate the 7 great disasters. He believed that Hugo Baskerville would be the one to grant him what he desires. Verker then bowed and thanked Hugo for granting him permission, promising that he would exceed his expectations.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you'd like to contribute further, you can now buy me a coffee. Every little bit helps in creating more quality content for you. Just click the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video.